Today we look back through the veil of a century at faces brought to life by color, young men who stare at us from a world on the brink of vanishing. The year is 1914. Europe is a continent of empires, of magnificent cities, and of intricate, fragile alliances. It is a world that believes in progress, in industry, and in the glory of the nation. It has not yet learned the true meaning of modern industrial warfare. It is the last summer of the old world. The spark that would ignite this global inferno was struck in the Balkans, a region simmering with nationalist tension. On June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist. What began as a regional crisis rapidly escalated. A complex web of treaties and military plans designed to provide security instead acted as a tripwire for catastrophe. Austria-Hungary, with the backing of Germany, declared war on Serbia. Russia, the self-proclaimed protector of the Slavic peoples, mobilized its vast army in response. This set off a fatal domino effect. Germany, caught between Russia in the east and France in the west, enacted its long-prepared strategy, the Schlieffen Plan. The plan called for a lightning-fast invasion of France, knocking her out of the war before Russia could fully mobilize. But to reach France quickly, the German army had to march through a neutral country, Belgium. On August 4, 1914, German troops crossed the Belgian frontier. They expected little resistance. They were wrong. The small but determined Belgian army fought back with incredible courage, delaying the German advance for precious weeks. This violation of Belgian neutrality was a profound shock to the world, and it was the final justification for Great Britain to declare war on Germany. The invasion was brutal, and the suffering of Belgian civilians became a powerful symbol of German aggression. Simultaneously, the French army launched its own offensive, Plan 17, into the lost provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. Dressed in their early war uniforms of bright red trousers and blue coats, the French soldiers marched into a hail of German machine gun fire. The opening battles were a horrifying slaughter, a grim introduction to the lethality of 20th century weaponry. The German advance pushed deep into France, coming within earshot of Paris. But the Belgian resistance, the arrival of the British Expeditionary Force, and a desperate, decisive counterattack by the French at the Battle of the Marne halted the invasion. The so-called Miracle of the Marne saved Paris and shattered the German dream of a quick victory. The war would not be over by Christmas. With both sides unable to land a decisive blow, they began to dig in. From the Swiss border to the North Sea, a vast, unbroken network of trenches was carved into the landscape of northern France and Belgium. This was the birth of the Western Front, the enduring image of the Great War. For the next 4 years, this line would barely move. Life for the soldiers, the French poilu, the German Lanzer, became a grim cycle of boredom, terror, and misery. They lived in mud and filth, plagued by rats, lice, and disease. The air was thick with the stench of death and chemicals. Between the opposing lines lay no man's land, a shattered lunar landscape of craters, barbed wire, and the unburied dead. The military command, trained in 19th century tactics, struggled to comprehend this new reality. Their answer was to throw more men and more artillery at the enemy lines. This led to battles of unimaginable scale and attrition. In 1916, Germany sought to bleed the French army white by attacking the fortress city of Verdun. The battle raged for 10 months. It became a symbol of national sacrifice and resolve for France. The cost was staggering. Over 700,000 French and German soldiers became casualties in that single grinding battle. The landscape around Verdun is still scarred to this day. That same year, the British and French launched a major offensive on the Somme River to relieve the pressure on Verdun. The first day of the Somme remains the single darkest day in the history of the British Army, but the battle lasted for months. drawing in countless French and German divisions as well. These battles were not about maneuver or genius. They were industrial meat grinders, designed to consume men and materiel until one side broke. While its neighbors were engulfed in flames, one nation stood as an island of armed neutrality: Switzerland. The Swiss army was fully mobilized throughout the war, not to fight, but to defend its borders from any belligerent who might try to cross. Their soldiers patrolled the mountainous frontiers, a constant watchful presence. Switzerland became a hub for diplomacy, espionage, and humanitarian work. It was a haven for refugees and a base for the International Red Cross, which worked tirelessly to document prisoners of war and provide aid. A small beacon of sanity in a continent gone mad. The stalemate of the trenches forced a deadly evolution in technology. Poison gas, chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas was introduced, adding a new dimension of psychological and physical horror. The first primitive tanks clanked across the battlefield, designed to crush barbed wire and cross trenches. In the skies, airplanes, once used only for reconnaissance, became deadly fighters engaged in aerial duels. The Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen of Germany, became the war's most famous ace, a new kind of modern knight in a very unchivalrous war. By 1917, the strain was showing on all sides. On the Eastern Front, the Russian Empire, battered by enormous losses and internal strife, collapsed into revolution. Russia exited the war, signing a separate peace with Germany. This was a huge victory for the Central Powers, allowing Germany to transfer hundreds of thousands of veteran troops to the Western Front for one final, decisive push. Yet in that same year, a new powerful adversary entered the fray. Angered by Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare, which targeted neutral shipping, the United States declared war. American industry and, crucially, fresh manpower began to flow towards Europe, tipping the scales irrevocably in favor of the Allies. In the spring of 1918, Germany launched its final, desperate gamble, the Kaiserschlacht, or Spring Offensive. Using new stormtrooper tactics, they smashed through the Allied lines, creating the largest territorial gains on the Western Front since 1914. But they could not sustain the advance. Their soldiers were exhausted and undersupplied, while the Allies, reinforced by the Americans, bent but did not break. The Allied counterattack, known as the 100 Days Offensive, began in August 1918. With coordinated use of tanks, aircraft, and infantry, the Allies began to systematically push the German army back. The German lines, held for 4 long years, finally collapsed. On the German home front, morale disintegrated. The Navy mutinied, strikes paralyzed cities, and Kaiser Wilhelm II was forced to abdicate. Faced with military defeat and revolution at home, the new German government sued for peace. At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, an armistice was signed in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, France. After 4 years of unimaginable bloodshed, the guns on the Western Front fell silent. The silence that followed was deafening. The war was over, but the world was forever changed. Over 17 million people, soldiers and civilians, were dead. More than 20 million were wounded, many maimed for life. An entire generation of young men was lost. The great empires of Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, and the Ottomans were all gone, their maps redrawn. The peace treaty signed at Versailles sought to build a new world, but in its harshness towards Germany, planted the seeds of a future, even more terrible conflict. As we look at these colorized photographs, we are not just seeing soldiers in uniform. We are seeing the farmers, the factory workers, the sons, the brothers, and the fathers who were swept up in this tide of history. It reminds us that behind the staggering numbers and the grand strategies were individual human beings who lived, fought, and died in the mud of Flanders and the fields of France. Theirs is a story of courage, suffering, and a profound loss of innocence. a warning from the past that we must never forget.